Let's explore this further with Professor Bheki Mngomezulu, political analyst. Prof Mngomezulu, thank you so much for joining us. Really do appreciate it. Let's perhaps start here around the importance of the ministries that make up the economic cluster, starting with the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. Of course, this used to be a department that was previously the Department of Trade, Industry and Economic Development, and in the new administration, the sixth administration, it was the Competition Department was introduced over there, and it has been amalgamated into that. This department is responsible for trade policy and, to a large extent, industrial policy in this country. That runs in tandem with fiscal policy in this country and, to a lesser extent, monetary policy. Tell us why the levers of the statutory and regulatory powers that come with the Department of Trade and Industry are so politically important that parties are actually fighting over it.
Thank you very much, Olivia, for having me, and good evening to your viewers. Yes, indeed, that department is critical for the reasons we have just stated. But then something very interesting is happening here. According to the Constitution, specifically Section 84E of the Constitution, it is clear that the power resides with the President, whoever the President is. Currently, the President is Cyril Ramaphosa, and therefore he has a final say. But then, of course, the negotiators on the side of the DA are saying that they want specific ministries. That in itself is a problem, because if you want to be a member of the Government of National Unity, knowing that you are not the only party, there are other political parties totaling 10, then you cannot claim that you want to have specific ministries which constitute the core of government, including this ministry.
Prof Mngomezulu, let me pause you there, because I do want us to temper a little bit with what the word prerogative actually means, right? Because it seems to be of great contention here. My understanding of the word prerogative has always been that the power resides here, but that person has full discretion in how they go about making that appointment. They could consult with whoever they feel like consulting with in the process of coming to a decision about who to employ in that position or not. Right. The only stipulation here is, as we know from the 2018 case, 2017 and 16 case, my apologies, where the Constitutional Court said that cabinet positions, appointments must be rational and must be done constitutionally so, right? Rationality means that it must be a person that is somewhat remotely fit to be able to make any sort of decision to appoint there. For instance, you can't appoint somebody there that is mentally incapacitated. That would be constituted as an irrational appointment. But prerogative means that you can consult, it means you can debate, it means you can be persuaded and persuade other people. It doesn't mean that the process becomes constitutionally incompetent the minute other parties seem to want to contest in debate and persuasion about who ought to be appointed there. Is the Democratic Alliance really getting to a point where they're trying to remove the president's constitutional and statutory powers, his prerogative to make appointments? I don't think that the DA assumes that they can make the appointments.
You know, Oliver, let us separate two things here. One, you have a constitution which was not drafted by the sitting president or his two predecessors. The constitution has been there, and it will always be there until it is reviewed. And the constitution is clear. The section I'm referring to, section 84E, it says that the president, whoever the president is, has a right to appoint ministers, and then there are a lot of other people that are appointed by the president. The consultation part is a separate thing altogether. Because before the president can make a decision, a final decision, definitely consultation will happen. So in other words, the two should be separated in the sense that consultation does not necessarily remove the powers of the president to have the final say in what happens. The case you are referring to, the judges confused us all when they were saying that the then President Jacob Zuma had to explain himself why he did a cabinet reshuffling. I'm one of the people, if you check your archives, I'm one of the people who said that the judges, in fact, on this one, they are misleading us, because the Constitution says the president can decide, but they are saying that he must go back and explain why he did or whatever he did. The rationality is okay. Of course, there is no president who can just appoint willy-nilly. He will have consulted, and then he arrives at a particular decision.
I mean, consultation is not a constitutionally imposed provision on a president when it comes to the appointment of cabinet. It's a nice to have, really. A president can choose to consult or not to consult. We've seen that many times across the span of our democracy. But just to get, again, to temper with the definition of prerogative. Is the behavior of the DA the sort of behavior that suggests that they don't think the president has unilateral power or the right at all to make any such appointment?
If the DA was making that argument, then it would be a valid argument. The problem is that the DA is making a different argument. We have 10 members of this GNU, and then they unilaterally decide which ministries they want. And they are saying that unless they get those ministries, then of course the deal is in jeopardy. That is negotiating in bad faith, because it's not a bilateral relations between the DA and the ANC. It's part of the collective, which means that we consider all the other coalition partners or GNU partners, and then we look at the positions that are there. The first thing that we need to discuss is how many ministries are we going to have in totality? Because you remember in the sixth administration, there was already talk about a bloated cabinet, and there were talks that it must be trimmed down. So you first agree on that one. We are not going to have 35, we're going to have 30, for example, and there are 10 of us. And then how do we then split these positions so that at least there is fairness in the process? You cannot claim 12 positions and say that is fair.
Yeah, let's go back to where we started this conversation. Why is DTIC so contentious?
It is contentious because if you want to create jobs, if you want to address poverty, you want to address inequality, you want to jumpstart the economy, you want to strengthen economic relations with other countries. So there are a lot of other things that are dependent on that ministry. If that ministry is badly handled, then you can forget about everything else that you promised the electorate during the campaigns. So that is why the DA says it wants that particular portfolio, and it also says that it wants not just a minister, but also a deputy minister. Yeah. Not only that, it also wants to have a say on who the DG is. DGs are civil servants, so you cannot say...
Just to pause you there before we get... I do want us to speak about the DG appointment separately from this, just to stay on the DTIC and its contention. Is it the type of department that is vulnerable to the politics of the principal of that department? To give an example here, the principal of that department in the sixth administration was Ibrahim Patel. He, as minister, oversaw the functions of industrial policy and trade policy in that department. Ibrahim Patel is known as a socialist. His politics are socialist, left-leaning socialist politics, having an extensive history in the Communist Party and extensive history as a unionist in his earlier years. Did that translate over into how that department went about executing its policy prerogatives? And I'm asking that to ask the question that if the DA were to get that ministry, is it the type of ministry where you would see the DA's free market fundamentalist policies take shape there?
You know, Olivia, if you are a minister, you are the political head in that ministry, but you don't take a unilateral decision. What normally happens is that you discuss things at the departmental level with your DG and DDGs doing the rest of the job. You then take that policy position to the cabinet where it is deliberated. Once cabinet is happy, you then take it to the National Assembly, and then some of those decisions also move to the NCOP, and then eventually they land on the president's table. So whether we have Patel or we have Steenhuisen or any other person should not really be an issue, because the decisions that are going to be taken will not be unilateral decision. Then the last point is that the issue of a socialist orientation is now long overdue. You recall that the ANC for a very long time was saying that once they go into government, they are going to implement socialist policies. But as early as 1993, they were clear that with the fall of communism, socialism in 1989-1990, they were persuaded to adopt policies that were not necessarily grounded in socialism. So having Patel, for me, was never going to be a problem, because he was not going to implement socialist policies in an environment that does not allow for that, or that is not conducive for that. So for me, that is not an issue.
Yeah. What else do you think may have been contention between the Democratic Alliance and the ANC at the moment as far as cabinet positions are concerned? Of course, we know from the leaked letters, particularly the President Ramaphosa's letter, that the contention for the deputy president was one that was a sticking point between the two parties. I would imagine that other departments such as Home Affairs, given that offer is now no longer a solid offer, that department might be up in the balance as well?
Yes, you remember that Gayton McKenzie from the Patriotic Alliance had already indicated that he was eyeing that position. and he was clear that if he were to get that position, he would make sure that there are no foreign nationals that are in the country illegally. And then he wanted that ministry. You could give him anything else, that would be just an icing on the cake. But if you gave him that ministry, he would be fine. Unfortunately, then for him, the DA also has an eye on that ministry for its own reasons, of course, some of which are not different from those of the PA. So there are certain positions or there are certain ministries that are in high contention that these political parties want to have a say in. But then it's okay for them to say, I would like to have certain ministries, but don't make that as a prerequisite that if I don't get this ministry, then it means the entire agreement is in jeopardy. Because then it goes back to the point I made earlier on that you are negotiating in bad faith. In any case, there are many of you, just accommodate one another, not for your sake, but for the sake of the country.
Yeah, the language of the letters of exchange between the President and the Democratic Alliance is very strong, one would say. It wasn't language that seems colloquial. It doesn't seem like language that was collegial in any sense of the word. Is there a potential that this deal could collapse entirely? The Democratic Alliance, Helen Zille, is on record saying that they are more than willing to be able to walk away if they don't get what they say. And I guess when you negotiate, walking away is everyone's right and option there. Do you think that President Ramaphosa has the appetite to go ahead and form a minority government? Because certainly the GNU coalition partners would not be able to cross the 50% line without the DA in it.
You know, this brings us back to where we started off with the three main political parties, that is the ANC, the DA, and the MK party. Now, what happened before the election is now coming back to haunt us. Our politicians were overexcited and they underestimated the reality on the ground. They were working, each of them was working on the assumption that they were going to win the election and they would go and they'll go to the union buildings without any assistance. Reality has ruled that out. So in this case, you have the ANC, which has 40%, 159 seats, and then you have the DA with 87 seats. Then we have the MK party with 58 seats. Ordinarily, if the ANC failed to persuade the DA to come into the party, the next option would have been to bring the MK party and other smaller parties. They would still be fine. Even with the MK party alone, they would still be fine. But a lot has happened before the election. They now have to go back and revisit some of the statements they made and then try to regroup. The point I'm making is a critical one, that if the DA were to walk away and the ANC does not find each other with the MK party, then we're in a crisis.
Yeah. Just maybe a last thing to explore. Should we add any weight to the letter that the EFF had written to the ANC saying that they are willing to be in talks with the ANC provided the DA and the Freedom Front Plus are not part of the coalition bloc? And could that potentially delay when the announcement could be made?
The EFF has been consistent. They said it before, they've said it now again in the letter I'm referring to. They are saying they have no problem forming part of the government of national unity, but their conditions are that, one, the DA must not be there, and two, the Freedom Front Plus must not be there. We can argue if that is a fair call or what, but the reality is they've been consistent on that. And at some point, the DA was saying the same thing.
Do you think the ANC is considering that letter with seriousness at the moment?
You know, with politicians, we'll never push off anything, whatever, because we'll think we'll understand them, then they surprise you. So anything is still possible. Because there was a meeting yesterday between Steenhuisen and Ramaphosa. We don't know what the outcome of that meeting was. But the point I was about to make was to say we have a problem in the DA because we have Steenhuisen who holds a different view. Then we have Helen Zille, who seems to be holding a totally different view on many fronts. This was the case before the election. This is the case even now, where they are singing in different tunes. So they must sort out their internal problems first before they go and engage other political parties, including the ANC.
Do you think there will be an announcement by the end of tomorrow?
Ideally, I would have wanted that to happen because it's long overdue. And after the meeting between Steenhuisen and President Ramaphosa, if they didn't agree yesterday, they will never agree. So they must just forget about that and then look for plan B. Yeah. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, Prof Mngomezulu, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time and your insights. Always a brilliant interlocutor. Really do appreciate it.